that I just make sure I share the right screen. So, share screen. Okay, let me know. Let me just see. Yeah, just give me let me know if you see the PowerPoint that says self. Okay, perfect. All right. So I see Renel's also on. Hi, Renel. So I'm going to jump straight into this. I want to keep it short, normally 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A. The previous time I do have these sessions, I focus mainly on coaches and athletes, but whatever I share here is applicable to everybody and anybody. And I had a question the previous time around self-awareness. How do you make a person become aware that they are actually maybe either doing something that's wrong or they're doing something maybe out of arrogance? The example we had was like a person that doesn't recognize that they, for example, need improvement in one area or something like that. So, and that is why I decided to look at this topic today. So I'm going to talk about self-awareness. I'm not going to, I mean, self-awareness is fairly self-explanatory, but I want to use most of the time today on what do you do with that? How do you handle is not the right word, but how do you handle that with another individual? So self-awareness, simply put, is how aware somebody is about their thoughts, their emotions, their behavior, and subsequently their identity, right? Their whole being of who they are. Then on top of that, if they know it, if they have the information, or they know they get angry a lot, or they know they have certain behavior that they don't like, can they interpret that? Can they, do they know what that tells them? And once they know, do they know what to do with that? You will see that in here, the content of the information is not so relevant. And the information that I'm also going to share on how to handle it, the content doesn't really matter. The reason, for example, let's say a person has outbursts. The reason why they have outbursts might be because they grew up in a violent home. But that content isn't important because it has it has happened. It's in the past. What we focus on, and especially what I focus on, is the fact that what do we do now with that information? So just quickly, I want to give a summary as to how we process information. I've spoke about this before, but this is a little, the graphic is a little bit different, but the information essentially stays the same. So here on the right hand, well, my right hand, on the screen right hand side is we have the world, right? From the world, we get a lot of what we call sensory input. Our senses are the only organs or systems, rather, probably, are the only systems that take in the information from our environment so that we can make sense out of it. So that's why it's called senses, right? Because the information goes to our brain processes the information, tells us I'm sitting on a chair that's fairly hard or fairly soft. So because I feel my skin feel it a certain way. So that's the input we get from our environment through all the sensory input. Now it can be visual. You can see something. It can be auditory. Oh, I see this is a spelling mistake. I missed it. You can hear things. It can be kinesthetic, so you can feel things. It can be olfactory, which means you smell it, or it can be gustatory, which means you taste it. Now, that information comes in through these different senses, and then neurologically, it changes it into either an image, a sound, a feeling, a certain smell, or a taste. So that happens in a split, well, probably quicker than a split second, because it's not that if you hear, I don't know if you guys can hear, I know people say sometimes they can hear the birds when I'm on a meeting, they can hear the birds outside my window. So it's, you hear the sound, that sound first need to go to your brain for your brain to process it as a pigeon or a bird or whatever, and a bird sound, and then feeds it back so that you can recognize it as such. So obviously that happens very quickly. Now, throughout our entire life, we have our environment plays a critical role as to how we process this information. That includes the way we were brought up. It includes the people that had an impact in our lives, or our life. It includes the people that we were surrounded with, people, our primary caregivers at school, anybody that had an influence, and our environment, obviously, how we grew up, where we grew up, that type of thing. And every single thing that we process comes out through our mouth and other ways, but mainly through our mouth as well. And we talk about that as a linguistic filter. In other words, that's one of the filters that the information goes through. And that then we have a conscious mind, right? That tells us consciously if we not tells us, but we can decide consciously something we want to do it, we don't want to do it, or whatever the case might be. But then we also have behavioral programs, the unconscious programs that runs automatically, that you don't even know that are going on in your brain. You just like, I know I have people on here that's been heavily involved in their own weight loss. I know that I have people here that's involved in their own personal development. So it's, you know, it's that automatic things that you do that you're not even conscious about until you become conscious. And that output then, like I said, the way we speak, our actions, our attitude, and the perspective we have of the world. Now, I'm going to talk about the map of the world, our map of the world. Every single person has a map of what the world looks like. And this is the left-hand side that I'm talking about. So once all of that sensory input comes in, through all of these filters, we create a particular map or perspective, or framework is also another word you can use, of how we see the world. So just so you know that if I talk about the map of the world, that's what I'm speaking about. Now, we all of us do it. We, throughout this whole process of sensory information that comes in and we process it, there are three things that happens, three type of things that's happening with that information. Everybody does it. And I'm going to run through it and you will see the examples and how we all actually are doing it. But of course, we want to change that, and now we can change that. We delete information, we distort information, and we generalize information. We all do it automatically, and I'm going to talk more about that. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is what we're going to do with this whole thing around self-awareness is we cannot teach another person to become more self-aware or to get more self-awareness, but we can challenge their map of the world that they have with certain questions, and in conversation, casual conversation, we can challenge that so that they can become more self-aware. And that is why I'm explaining this piece first. When I was preparing this slide or the information, I realized there's a ton of information on this topic, specifically this model that I'm going to show you. Way too much to include in today's session, but so I will follow up. I think we'll probably can stand still here for the next 4 or 5 months, talking through this and give different examples and different ways on how to deal with this. All right, so important to remember that we all have these filters created as a result of our beliefs, values, upbringing, memories, past experiences, decisions we make. We have time filters because we have certain things that we've experienced at certain time points, and that we create a map of our world because of that. We have cultural filters. We have language filters. There's so many that we create as we move through life. The other thing I want to talk about is also just a definition, is what we call surface structure versus deep structure. Now, all that means is that when I see something, I want to go back just quickly to this slide. When I see something, that's part of the surface structure, right? It comes in, I convert the sensory input into information, and here, the easiest way to explain it, here in my head sits the deep structure. So to give you an example of that, husband comes home, he's tired, he had a hard day, and he go and sit in the living room, take off his shoes and leave it just there. The wife goes off, buy dinner, she comes back, and when she walks in the door, she completely flips out. And she, the first thing she says is, you are always messy. That's the surface structure. If one now, and I'll explain to you guys how to do that, but if one now sort of understand why she's feeling like that, she might eventually say, I really had a bad day, I'm tired, I've been on my feet the whole day, and this one wanted that and that. So the deep structure is really the deep meaning of what she has said, right? The thing that she's really said was, I am tired. It's not so much about the husband, that's a messy husband, but what she really wanted to say is she's tired. So that's what we talk about when we talk about deep structure. That's what we mean. So it's almost like the thing that comes at you at face value, and then there's a deeper meaning behind that, which is the deep structure. So that's all you have to remember for that. So the goal for today is, I want to provide you with a set of questions that's designed specifically to challenge and expand these limits that a person has of their world. And even our own worlds. You can ask these questions to yourself. If you catch yourself saying certain things, you can ask these questions to yourself. Journal about these questions with yourself. That will even expand your own world, a map of the world that you have. And one of the ways that we do that is through what we would call a NLP meta model. So I'm going to teach you a little bit of NLP stuff today, which is neuro-linguistic programming. Some of you might have heard about that before. But this is mainly focused on linguistics and how people speak and the words they use and what do you then do with that. So it's really about what they did is they studied questions that therapists ask people a lot of times, and different types of questions. And they realized that there were certain questions that were more effective than others. So they looked for the trends in those questions, and it allowed different perspectives of a problem to be explored. So in other words, they saw that if the therapist asked these types of questions, it's like people understand and got the insight that there are different perspectives out there that they can explore. And it also helped, obviously, to explain sometimes how people think. Now, how does this work? The process. When and if you recall back to that first slide where I showed the picture, what we do with information. So these are the three different types. We generalize, we delete, and we distort. I'm only going to talk, there are different types of generalizations we do. I'm only going to talk of one type of generalizations today, and I'll walk through them over the next few months as well. But I'm going to talk about the one that's the easiest to pick up, and the easiest one you can actually practice. And a great place actually to practice this is on social media, because people run rampant on social media. And when you ask them, obviously people that don't think about things, and when you start to ask them these questions, it's like, whoop, they disappear because they don't know what to answer you, but you've really asked the right question, which is what we want to do. So generalization is the process by which you take an element in your perspective of the world and you use it to represent an entire category. So if you had a bad race, for example, then a person might say that one bad race, and a person will say, all my races are bad. Or if a man broke up with a woman might say, all men are useless. So they take one thing that happened with them and they generalized it over an entire category of men or a category of races. Obviously, what they do is they take the feelings and the emotions that they have and they generalize that. And the problem with that is it's a behavior pattern that stops us from being aware of the entire situation. And I know if you think back to certain people where you recognize this, you will be able to sort of recognize how that impacts their lives as well currently. Delusion, I'm just going to run through these definitions. The delusion patterns are nothing other than selective attention. So it can be conscious or unconscious. But essentially, if you are in a room full of people and you have a conversation with the person next to you, it's impossible to listen to what's going on if you obviously are engaged in the conversation, but it's impossible to listen what's going on in the rest of the room. So your mind focus, delete stuff so that you can focus on one thing. Another interesting thing, and once we get to the example, you might understand this a little bit. We talk about verbs. Every single sentence, right, has a verb, as a subject, a verb, and an object. Remember, in English, we were taught that a sentence has to have that in order for it to be a sentence. And what people do is they take the verb out of the sentence or out of their scenario, and it's like they freeze that moment and create a picture of it. So to give you an example of that is, people might say communication is useless in this place. So communication is the verb communicate that they took out and they made it an object. So actually very interesting on how people are doing that. And if you can change for them and help them, if they can change that verb back, that object back to a verb, it opens up a whole new world for them. But we'll get to that later on. Then distortion is the process where people literally construct, manufacture, create, or manipulate the sensory data that comes in. And I think we've all seen that as well. I know with teenagers, I think we see that a lot, or even children that are a little bit younger, where something has happened and they have this big story of what has happened, which is completely not what has happened. But I mean, that's how they see the experience and how they believe the experience to be. And also in the distortion section, a lot of times people claim to know someone's internal state, like that person hates me, or that person is full of hate or don't like me. So what I'm really doing if I say that is I sort of mind read what's going on inside of that person, how they feel. That's also something that people do a lot. So, like I said, I'm only going to look at generalization today, one of those. What we want to do with if a person uses this type of language is we want to understand how does it create some sort of loss of possible future experiences. Because they say certain things, and keep this in mind when we go through the examples, because they say certain things, they're going to miss out on opportunities or experiences, or they're going to have a diminished level of that opportunity or experience. So they're either going to completely miss out, or they're not going to have the full experience of something. Deletion and distortion patterns I'll talk about later. Important to remember that not all generalizations, deletions, and distortions are bad. So some have very useful applications. So if I say I am, if something happens and I get determined and I say I will always, my eating habits will always be great, then that's obviously a good thing, right? Okay, so how would we use this? When we find somebody that has generalized something in their life, the first thing we want to do is we want to help them to make them more self-aware of what they've just did. We want to help them to explore counter examples and then help them understand what are they actually avoiding. And that is what lies in that deep structure. So So what is lying there that they are actually avoiding? And 99, almost 100% of the times, even though they might say a remark about somebody else, when you take them through the questions, it will always come back to something that they want or need to change. How do we not want to use this? You can practice this and use it, not practice actually, you can use it still today on somebody. You can use it on your spouse, you can use it on your children, you can use it in the workplace, you can use it with your friends, you can use it when you do sales, when you sell something. You can use this when you coach athletes, you can use this in any area of your life. But I just wanted to put this down in terms of how you not want to use it. You don't want to use it to solve somebody's problem, right? Because the whole idea is to challenge their thinking so that they can get to their own insight. And that's how their self-awareness will grow. Because I think most of you, and even for me, I've definitely been in a situation where I would say something to somebody. I would say to them, you are maybe not, but you are ignorant. Maybe not the best example, but let's say, instead of asking questions so that they can get to the insight that they are might be a little bit ignorant, I might say directly to them, you are ignorant. And when we say that directly to people, trying to solve the problem there and then, is people can get very defensive about that. We really want to use it to investigate. Ask the questions, investigate, and leave the person up to themselves to sort of get to that insight. Yes, the other thing though, a person is never going to come to you and say, oh, you're right, I've just got this brilliant insight now that maybe I'm not self-aware about this. They will never come and say that, but I promise you that they will leave there where you've actually helped them to sort of expand that boundary that they've pulled around them. You've helped them to expand that a little bit. And if you do that over and over with them, you can help them to expand that boundary even more. And even with ourselves, we can do it. Like I said in the beginning, don't get stuck in the content. It doesn't really matter what the content of the actual issue is. And I'll show you a nice example of what I mean by that. And don't pigeonhole. So let's say a person says something, they had a bad training day and they are tired, and then maybe somebody wants to like hammer on, do you sleep? So no, they don't sleep. Okay, well, are you worried about something? And then people just hammer on that. What are you worrying about? That doesn't matter. So don't pigeonhole on one single thing, if that makes sense. Okay, so what does that look like? One example of generalization is, I picked the one that's the easiest, like I said, to understand and the easiest to pick up. Even if you leave, I've probably used maybe some of these now already in the presentation, but even if you leave here, you will be able today to pick this up from somebody. You want to look out for words like nobody, no one, all, everybody, everyone, never, and always. So these are also the words that people use that we refer to as 100% words. So there's no exception. It's 100% like this. There is absolutely no exception. And what we want to do is we want to help them find the exception, because that sort of, and that's what I meant in the beginning by saying we want to find the counter of what they are actually saying. So if somebody says, nobody loves me, surely there's somebody in the world, even if it's just one person, that loves them. So we want to find that exception and then help them determine whether that's really true. So, because what people do is, if they use these words, nobody, no one, all, everybody, everyone, never, always, what they're really saying in their deep structure, what they're really saying is there are no exceptions, and therefore there are, or I have no choices. And that's what people are, that's what they're feeling inside when they use those words. So let me give you an example. I use the example of nobody likes me. Somebody comes in, the athlete comes in, tells the coach, child comes in, the mother tells, nobody likes me. So the coach asks, well, I admit that and you can use this. I admit that we've just met, only just met, but you don't seem that bad to me. And then the athlete says, well, you don't count. Coach says, who counts then? And then the athlete might say, people in my training group. And the coach might say, how do you know that they don't like you? Athlete might say, well, they never talk to me. And the coach might ask, do you talk to them? Athlete might say, no, I can't do that. Coach says, what would it be like if you could talk to them? Athletes say, well, I wouldn't know what to say. And I don't feel very comfortable around them. I don't know how to feel comfortable and relaxed around them. Coach might ask, if you could do that, do you think that they might like you? Athlete says, yeah, probably. Coach asks, okay, what is the first thing you need to be able to know what to say, feel comfortable and relaxed? So you see here how a statement from an individual saying nobody likes me turned into something that's really about the quality of a conversation that that person might have with somebody else, or the quality of that person's presence amongst people. So where initially it was about nobody likes me, it was about other people that don't like me. Now the athlete can recognize, oh, but there are things that I need to meet that need of feeling liked by people. All right. So the other example also is if we go back and the coach ask, or the person asks, do you talk to them? And if the person said, yes, I talk to them. And the coach could have said then, in other words, do you think people will talk to you if they don't like you at all? And then the athlete might say yes, or the coach could have asked, do you think people talk to you because they like you? Athlete might say yes. And then the coach can say, so there are people that like you. So now the athlete cannot say no, because the athlete has said that people might like them or her or him. So you see how you can use these types of questions. And I'm going to show you, it's just four questions in all of these scenarios that you have to have in your arsenal to ask these people. How that completely changed from nobody like me to, okay, there's some stuff that I need to do and develop within myself. So that's how you expand that person's world of the map of their own world. And that's how you can help a person to expand their self-awareness. Other examples I have. I see this is cut off, but I'll fix it before I send the slides off to everybody. Somebody might say it always rains when I have a race. So there's the always. So what you can do, one of the examples is you can repeat that keyword where you tell a person always, like it always rains when you have a race, really, every single time. And then obviously the person can say something different. A person might say all coaches are lying, or all men are lying, or all women are lying. Really, all of them? Did any coach told you the truth at least once in your life? And then that conversation can continue. Or you can ask what would happen if they didn't lie to you, and then take the conversation from there. Somebody might say, I've messed up everything. So you messed up everything? Really? Every single thing? More examples. Every time I try to do something nice, it backfires. You can ask the person, has there ever been a time in your whole life when doing something nice didn't backfire? And so then a person might say, yes, there's been this one time. And then you can tell them, so it's not really that every time you try something backfires, right? I never do strength work. So this is more a little bit of something with a positive tone to it. Somebody might come in and say, no, I never do strength work. And person can ask the person, never? So in your whole athletic career, you've never did any strength work? I will never get it right. You can ask the person, has there ever been a time when you did get it right? And the person then obviously will find something. And then, or you can ask, what prevents you from getting it right? And the person might say, oh, I think I need more training in this area, or maybe I need more sleep. So everyone is against me. Again, you can ask, You mean like every single person is against you? So there are 4 key things that we ask. First, we can repeat that word that they are, the key word that they are using, like you can just repeat it like really always. Then you can ask the question, has there ever been a time, and repeat what they've said, the counter of that, like if everybody hates me, ask, is there, or if they say nobody loves me, was there ever a time that somebody loved you? Is there somebody in the world that loves you? And the other thing you can ask is, what prevents you from getting it or doing it? And then the other one example is, what would happen if you do this or if you did that? So those are the 4 key questions that you can ask a person in any of those. And it will be easy for you to pick it up when you have conversations with people, which one you want to pick. You will see from the examples, obviously, we want to be tactful with the questions, right? It's not like, you want to read the conversation and the tone of the conversation, and be gentle with these questions with people, depending on the conversation and like I said, the tone of the conversation, so that people don't think you're rude. Sometimes it can come out rude, but yeah, you really want to be sort of gentle with the questions that you ask. And that is it. Any questions? Yeah, Christine, you're on mute. Other way around. There you go.
Oh, that was so interesting. I've never thought the mind goes so deep, you know, to think of these words, which are much easier than going all the way round and talking for half an hour, whereas you've just got a couple of words and you've said what you want to say.
Right. And a conversation can go 2 ways, right? You will get somebody that's going to give you all of the information. You will never ever, well, you don't have to ask any questions, but we don't get people like that, right? If you think about the questions we want to ask them, or you're going to get the people, or what's going to happen is that they leave out info, or and that's sort of where this whole generalization thing comes from. Amazing tool also to avoid conflict, because if people say something like always and nobody ever loves me, whatever, the other person tend to react towards that instead of like helping the person to understand, but it's not really everybody. Yeah. But yeah, great. This really, really a great tool.
I think yes. It's so good, because lots of people sort of play the victim, and then you know, you don't have the time or the capacity to stand there and really be nice to them. So one would go the long way around and say something that's not very nice, whereas you could have just said 5 words and conversation finished.
Yeah. And they say that, I mean, these models were developed many, many years ago through people like Milton Erickson and Noam Chomsky. I always get that wrong. But they say is you should ask around 7 questions maximum, like depending on the answer that they give. But you would be able to, within those 7 questions, sort of be able to manage that statement that the person made or that conversation. And less, obviously, it can be less as well. So yeah, that's true. Runel.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, and you?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, these 4 questions, that's amazing. I think that's very, to get out of the stuck feeling, on that again. And then there was something you said, for instance, I just thought of clients sometimes, then they say, especially at hospital, then they say they slept so bad. And then like, I tend to think, okay, what could have caused them sleeping bad? But so you said don't get stuck in there. But where do you go further then? How do
So
you take that?
that example is that's a course that's an example of one of those deletions, which we will call cause and effect. So if somebody use a word like so, it's comparative to something. So remember also always we want to like find the counter. So if it's a comparison, we want to find out to what are they comparing it. So and then you can also, well, first of all, in all of these examples that I'm going to talk about, the one thing that works for most of them is the question, how specifically. So if somebody's have slept so bad, you can ask them how specifically. Or you can ask them, what do you mean by bad? What's bad? Or in comparison to what? So those are like 3 questions that you can use also to ask them that. Because now they might have a legitimate reason as to why they slept bad, or they were cold. So typically what we would do, right? I've slept so bad. You would think of a mental reason why they slept bad. But if you ask they might say, oh, it was cold last night. The aircon was too cold. And so true.
Okay.
So those 3, first of all, how specifically works for almost everything. Even if a person say with the generalization, everybody hates me. How specifically does everybody hate you? So that's an easy one to remember for most of them. And then compared to what? And what do you mean by bad? What's bad? Other questions? Cool. Then we are on time. I'm trying to keep it short. I took a bunch of info out, and that's why I decided no, I'll talk about that next month. So we can stay on this topic a little while to work through all of the info. But thank you guys for joining. And it was nice to see. It was nice to see you, Christine.
Okay, it was really good to be here. I found that interesting.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right.
All right,
Have
Renelle.
a weekend.
I will. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.